Hopefully everybody is having a great summit. Again, my name is Reba Dominski. I lead social responsibility in the foundation at U.S. Bank, and I am so excited to be here to talk about this topic of the changing world of giving. Boy, the last couple years have been something. A lot has changed. And if you are sitting in your seat and you are saying, well, nothing really has changed about my job, come see me afterwards and we'll talk about the fact that the changing world around us is hopefully causing all of us to change, both personally, we talked a little bit about that as a panel, but also in the way that we do what we do. And I know everybody here is seeking to have maximum impact, which is why I'm so excited to have these panelists with you today. As Jason mentioned, we will do a Q&A at the end. We'll have about 10 minutes for question and answers, so jot down on your phone or a piece of paper if you've got a question for one or all of our panelists, and we'll make sure that we do that at the end of our session. With that, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Now, you have their full bios in your app, so you can look all of that great detail up. I've asked them to do a brief introduction and then to describe their career in 6 words. All right? And Franz has a haiku. So prepare yourself. Now, I'm going to give you an example. Here's mine. I've done this exercise before, and think about it for yourself. How would you describe your career? You don't even get an elevator speech, right? You get 6 words to describe your career. Mine is a quote from Maya Angelou, roughly translated. It is, once you know better, do better. Once you know better is about curiosity, is about showing up in rooms like this with people like this and getting to know them, asking about what they do, but asking about who they are and their lived experience and what brought them to this table. Doing better is what motivates me. It's about action. I don't ever come away from a conference like this and have a manila folder saying Operation Hope Forum, December 2022, shove papers in it and put it in a drawer. I walk away and think, what am I going to do differently because of what I learned? So that is my 6-word essay. With that, I will turn it over to Beth. She will do, again, a quick introduction and share her 6 words.
Thanks, Reba. I'm Beth Ardwant, Chief Communications Officer for First Horizon Bank, which is headquartered in Memphis, Tennessee, although I live in Lafayette, Louisiana. Of course, Reba started with this inspirational 6-word description. Mine is, dynamite comes in small packages.
Woo!
And, thank you. Which is not a surprise since I can't reach the floor on these chairs. But, as Reba, we talked last week, and she told us about, this idea, and I had to ask, what's a haiku again? So, but anyway, that was the first thing that came to mind because, I thought about my 30-year career and the last 20 years in the C-suite, and, people, for whatever reason, associate capability with size and stature. And that's just not true. So I feel like I've been very fortunate in my career and proud to have proven lots of people wrong. But at the same time, it also made me think about how that may resonate with each of you, right? Whether it's a gender issue, race, education, background, people make assumptions, and it's up to only us to overcome those assumptions and to make sure that that our passion, our curiosity, our commitment, our drive, we're the ones responsible for making that difference. So dynamite comes in small packages. Figure out what your thing is and go for it.
I love it.
All right, great. We can turn that over now to Franz to give us a haiku.
It's a little too much drama for what I'm going to say. So I'm Franz. I am the Chief Corporate Affairs Officer of PayPal, and that includes our social innovation and social impact work, external communications, employee communications, and also public affairs and our strategic research work. So for my 6 words, I would say as follows. Building community, meaningful pause, always makes a difference. And I chose that because I have found during the course of my life and career that in everything that we approach, whether it's professionally or personally, if you can focus on how you build community and demonstrate respect and bring people together, that always advances the work, and it builds support and inspiration. So we think about that a lot at PayPal within our company. and how we think about employee culture and communications and change. We think about that with respect to our customers. We think about that in the public sector. We think about it with respect to our shareholders, and certainly with our nonprofit partners and in all the social impact work we do.
Thank you, Franz. Heidi, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Heidi Schoonover. I am the CRA Managing Director of Strategic Programs and Initiatives at Truist, and the Cliff Notes version of my bio is I work on strategy and innovative solutions around CRA and community development. And mine is a little bit longer than 6 words. It's a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, and it's people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. This was something that was shared with me early in my career, probably when I thought I knew more than what I actually did. But I'm very passionate about the work of CRA community development and the long-term impact that we're having. And so I have the mindset that I go into every interaction with individuals and communities, letting them know I truly care about the work that we're doing and the work that they're doing, because I believe that if somebody cares about an individual or a community, they're going to invest more of their time, more of their energy, more of their thought leadership into it. And so I want to make sure that every interaction I have comes from a place of letting people know that I care about this work and that it's meaningful and impactful.
Beautiful, although you broke the rules.
I'm sorry.
Duly noted. Heidi is a rule breaker. We like her.
Sorry.
We like her.
I'm also sitting on the edge of my seat because, like Beth, I can't reach the floor in my people.
Well, dynamite comes in small packages,
Yes,
right?
I like that.
So maybe we'll start with you.
Okay.
Again, the purpose of this conversation is about how we've changed in the changing world around us. Can you highlight a couple of key changes at Truist or in you over the last couple of years that you want to share with the group?
Sure. So I'll start with Truist. So for those of you that don't know, Truist is basically the result of the merger of Heritage BB&T and Heritage SunTrust. And something that changed in the last couple of years is we announced in July of 2019 a $60 billion community benefits plan, in which we said we would lend and invest $60 billion into our LMI and minority communities. And I'm happy to report that we have not only met that goal, but exceeded it and have lent and invested over $68 billion into those communities. And we're not done. But the reality is we did that during not only a merger, but a pandemic, and also with a lot of social unrest going on. And we could have used all of that as an excuse not to deliver, but that's not who Truist is. We basically said, we're a purpose-driven organization. Our purpose is to inspire and build better lives in communities. And what we realized is we needed to deliver on that commitment in order for our communities to succeed, because as an organization, if our communities don't succeed, we don't succeed. And so we stepped up our philanthropic giving in response to everything that was going on, while also being committed to delivering on that community benefits plan. We also we looked at how we strategically worked in our communities, leveraging our philanthropic giving with other capital resources. An example of that would be, we recently made an announcement of a $120 million investment in building the capacity of our small businesses. And this is important because there's a philanthropic component to it, but there's also other Truist capital resources being brought to the table. I'm a firm believer that you can't philanthropy a community into prosperity. Mm-hmm. You have to bring other capital resources for that community to be able to economically prosper, economically grow in prosperity. And so the commitment that we've made is a large, substantial philanthropic component, but also bringing other partners in and providing capital to those communities so that they can economically grow and prosper, and not just be reliant on philanthropy. So those would be the two I want to highlight.
That's really powerful. $60 billion in the midst of a pandemic and civil unrest, as well as bringing the whole organization together to attack some of the challenges you're facing. Thank you for that. Franz?
So I think, as your question is around three changes or developments, and I'll include maybe some insights that we've learned as we've gone through this, because I think being a technology company, there's a tremendous amount of change every year for us as a business. But in the context of giving, I think over the last several years, we've learned that giving is not episodic or one initiative at a time, but that we've learned that our company and our customers can focus and give on many different imperatives and high needs at the same time. And I think years ago we thought about it more as one campaign, then there's another campaign. But we have so much need in the world, and we found that our customers and our partners, that we can focus on Ukraine, we can focus on closing the racial wealth gap, we can focus on empowering women, we can focus on addressing climate adaptation and resilience, and that these interrelate and they can be done simultaneously. PayPal has a significant donation platform, and our customers give around close to $20 billion a year on PayPal to causes all over the world. That's millions of customers and hundreds of thousands of charities. And it's a very democratic process. Most of the gifts that are given are under $100, but each one represents a sort of a broad, focused approach to solving problems. Second observation is that we learned a lot about our employees during the pandemic and since, and that at a time when everyone had to really focus on their own families and their parents and their children and what was happening in their community, we also found a huge urge in our employee community to help. People wanted to help. They wanted to volunteer. They wanted to give. They wanted to participate in social impact. And we had a surge of volunteering. Over half of our employees volunteer. I think last year we had over 70,000 hours of employee volunteer time. That was, and that's just what they formally recorded. Who knows, lots of stuff is happening outside. But we also saw our community impact teams in each of our offices really double down and expand. We saw employees stepping up and joining our employee resource groups, getting involved in community impact. And we found that it connected to their level of inspiration and connection to the company, and that it contributed to lower attrition rates, to more inspiration in the mission of our company. And the mission of our company is to democratize financial services and to connect people to the global economy who may not have been able to afford it, or that it was too difficult. So our employees stepped up, and that was a big change, but also made perfect sense when you stand back and look at why do you work at a company with these capabilities. Part of it is that you can bring all of that to bear in a time of need. And the third thing that I would say is it became more clear than ever that partnerships are absolutely necessary. And that's partnership with the public sector, partnership with the nonprofit sector, partnerships across the private sector. And we saw that in each of our initiatives. We have an initiative that we've now completed, which was to devote over $500 million to doing our part to address racial equity and closing the racial wealth gap. We did that in partnership with nonprofits because they brought expertise and connectedness in communities all over the country that we didn't have, and we learned a huge amount. We did that in combination with the public sector because there are huge resources that can be brought to bear as well. And we did it in partnership with our employees and our customers who stepped up with us. And so that takeaway, and I think these all interconnect in some way, but I'll leave that for a haiku later. All these three things interconnect, but it was a lot of learning and in many ways very inspiring for us.
Thank you, Franz. I heard a couple of significant things. One, always on giving, and your comment about causes reminded me a little bit today about the conversation about a zero-sum game. I'm even reflective of the causes we care about at US Bank, and sometimes you feel like you've got to choose versus thinking about you can support multiple things and do all of that well. Also employees, and I hope we talk about employees. I think we will a lot, and the power of the employee base, and then the importance of partnership. And one of the things I heard in your comments was this idea of trusting nonprofit partners who are on the ground to know what needs to be done and where to give. And for many of us who are in philanthropy, That sounds a lot like general operating funds. I'm a huge fan of Gen Ops funding, multi-year Gen Ops funding, if we can do it. Thank you, yes. And saying to our partners, you know better than we do where the dollars are needed. So Beth, how about you?
It's really not fair to go after PayPal, you know? So, but yes. So I'm going to piggyback on what they've both said, and Heidi and I have a lot in common because she noted the fact that Truist is a result of a merger of equals, and First Horizon, we too just went through a merger of equals, which was announced just before the pandemic hit. So when I thought about, you know, what's changed, what have we learned, I thought both, you know, how did the company respond, and what are the lasting positive effects of what we've all experienced, a series of really horrific events. And so the first thing that came to mind was adaptability, right? Us as individuals, as businesses, as large corporations, as a nation, we really had to figure out how to adapt to operating in a whole new world. And for our industry, our banking industry, and for our company in particular, our people are at home. We had 8,000 employees, half have 4,000 on each side who had never met for the most part. Now they're working at home, trying to figure out how to take care of their families, petrified to death of the pandemic. And we threw the Paycheck Protection Program at them and said, we're gonna turn it on a dime, and we're gonna get out there and provide stability and sustainability to our small businesses. And we all know that's the backbone of our economy. And so for corporate America, particularly the banking industry, to partner with the government and execute a program that provided that type of support when you have a nation in crisis is pretty incredible. And so if we think about think about the incredible lasting effect of that, we were able to realize that we could be nimble, even corporate America, that in a banking business that is highly regulated, is all about mitigating risk, can be really stiff and corporate. We had to turn on a dime. People had to work from home, take on jobs that they didn't know how to do before then, and figure out how to serve our small businesses, be there for them. And so I think just very importantly, that's a really highlight, a positive thing that came out of a terrible time and a lot of hardships. But we demonstrated as a company that we were going to be there for our clients in their greatest time of need. And that's important for us to take forward, making sure that it's not just about being there, you know, on the good days, but about how do we think differently when people really need us to show up. And so proud of the industry, proud of the company. I know all three of our banks participated and did a really outstanding job. The second thing that comes to mind is leveraging virtual technology and communications. So, you know, I'm not a big fan of social media, but because I have children and I just, you know, all that. But I do think that, you know, Zoom and WebEx and just the ability for our company to communicate, again, at a time where we didn't know each other, was really a blessing, right? People made it a blessing. And so when we think about how we used that then and we use that now, it has radically changed the way we run our companies. Whether you're an itty-bitty business or a very large global company, you know, that has really radically changed the way we operate. And so even when it comes to giving, you know, at a time when businesses could have pulled back and said, we've got to focus on the health of our people, we've got to focus on our own financial bottom line. I was really proud of First Horizon to staying true to our passion and our commitment to making sure our communities as a whole were healthy and could be vital as we came out of this. And so we use this as a way to look at through a new lens, and how could we look at philanthropy and community service differently. So taking Operation Hope as an example, we sat down with Operation Hope for many days, many hours, and we talked about how do we keep our Hope Inside program running when nobody can go to the branches, right? None of our clients are coming in. Our people were still there working, but I mean, the traffic was extremely light, and we wanted to be very conscientious about health. And so we developed and adopted a hub and spoke model that allowed our coaches, counselors to work from home and to serve their existing and prospective clients virtually. It was so successful that we operate that today. So using our limited resource, we all have limited resources, using limited resources in a virtual capacity allows one counselor to serve people outside his or her footprint, right? And so the depth and the breadth of our service and our impact has really changed. And I know Truist has done some of that. Like, really, we were one of the first. Our regulators even commented on our ability to think about community service and philanthropy differently, and we're really excited about to see how that continues to grow and expand. We now even do financial literacy virtually, and again, it doesn't have to be that one-on-one contact or sitting in a conference room. It allows us to really reach people outside of that geographic limitation and outside of our 12-state footprint. So really proud of and excited to see what's next in that regard.
Could I add one thought? I think the Paycheck Protection Program was a great example of collaboration where the United States government realized it needed the private sector to be able to figure this out and distribute monies. We all understood that these monies were necessary to help small businesses in particular, and everybody stepped up across the sector, whether it was payments companies like ours that were connected into millions of small businesses or banks who had all those connections and relationships. And it was a collaboration just across the industry. And I think the pandemic taught us we needed that collaboration to get stimulus checks out too, that not everybody was at their address. So some people needed to receive them digitally. And so in our case, digital payments became an important way to get money quickly out, but also with vaccines and how people had access to vaccines. And that private sector, public sector, I think, made a big contribution to how this country came through the pandemic in a different way than others did.
I agree, and I think one of the other key learnings that we all had through PPP was this learning around the importance of banking relationships. And for many of our small businesses and entrepreneurs, those banking relationships weren't in place to be able to take advantage of PPP. So I think we all learned through that experience, and in that learning, I think, is where we want to lean into what from that learning do we carry forward and make sustainable. And speaking of learning, I want to ask the next question. You've all talked about things that have been working pretty effectively in a changing world. I'd love to hear something that hasn't worked, because usually what's not working creates some of our greatest learnings. So I might start with you, Heidi, and I think one of your learnings was kind of technology related, yep. So building off of what Beth spoke to earlier.
Yeah, so I have two examples actually, building off of PPP. One of the things that we saw even with small business clients is not all of them had the proper paperwork and had the proper accounting in place to be able to provide the proof needed to actually apply for PPP. So that was a big learning hurdle, I think, for the industry. But I would say on the philanthropic side, we had this great need to get dollars out to make a great impact in the community and address these critical needs. And what we found is the majority of our grant dollars were being deployed and having great impact. But rightly so, we had some organizations that brought forward a plan that we were really excited about, and we did not do the appropriate level of vetting to really make sure that they had the capacity support to actually be able to take that plan from paper and put it boots on the ground and deliver the way that they wanted to. So a lesson learned for us is really making sure that we're not only giving them the philanthropic support that they need, but also bringing in other capacity building support to make sure that they really can take this idea and drive meaningful impact in their community.
Thank you. Any other learnings built on that?
I was going to say that we didn't have a specific issue, but that is absolutely on par with what we've been very focused on, and it ties back to collaboration as well. One example comes to mind right now. We're working on an opportunity in Memphis, and the team here, my team here, is very instrumental in it, and trying to help a nonprofit get off the ground. We realized that our greatest way to help this individual and this group is not just financial support, but bringing other nonprofits to the table that have proven track records, yes. Right? So they bring their own ideas their own experiences, their own partners to the table, and it gives that nonprofit a chance to survive and succeed. And so, just collaboration's the key. Relationships and really leaning in to help others, whether it's officially or unofficially, I think is a great outcome of all the hardships we really have experienced the last few years.
I think that's great. So based on what you've experienced, help us paint a picture of the future. Think about that kind of ideal state and help us understand what's needed to get there. So in everything that you've experienced over the last couple of years, what's working, what's not, what's the vision for the future, and how do we achieve it? And Franz, I'm going to start with you.
Vision, okay. Let's have some questions.
Or let's take some audience ideas.
No. I would say that, look, I think one of the things we've learned as we've faced really completely unprecedented challenges, whether it's disruption in our economy, the way in which the social fabric of our country has been tested, that these can't be moments. They have to be ongoing work. That there's work on social justice that will always need to be done. There's work on closing the racial wealth gap, on addressing equity for women that always has to go forward. And that it's hard for me to take that challenge of what is an idealized future. What I'd like to think is that in an ideal way, we will not lose sight of all the work that needs to be done for us to have a truly inclusive economy, a just economy, and a just society. And that takes everybody's engagement. It's thinking about it every hour and advancing the work, both from the private sector and the public sector as individuals. And companies can play a role. We serve our shareholders, of course, but we serve stakeholders and communities. And I hope that we can keep focusing on that. And I also think we need to resolve how we're going to work, what the future of work is really going to look like. We've learned a lot during the pandemic. Many of us in this room, we all learned through our companies, we can work remotely and we can actually get the work done. And companies did that very impressively. But we also understood that people's needs were different, that the culture was changing. And now we're putting back together new frameworks for working. And I think everybody is experiencing that cultural change. And so I think we're going to find a new balance. I can't quite put my arms around it yet, but we're developing a flexible approach where lots can happen in person. There's magic in everybody being together in a room and the kind of conversations that are going to occur at these tables right afterwards and walking out. But there's also lots of people, I'm just pointing at the camera, there's lots of people out there in a hybrid world who are at the same time, cutting and pasting pieces of the conversations and experiencing it in different ways and connecting with their networks. And they're probably a little ahead of you on tweeting and posting. But that's another way of experiencing this. So I think on those two dimensions, it's exciting to see what we're going to be able to create. But the challenges are significant. And that, I think, is, that's the best I can do in anticipating the future.
No, I think that's well done. Any ads or
So
builds?
I would say, so last night, if y'all did not get to attend last night's opening reception and hear from the 4 entrepreneurs, you missed a fantastic event. Changed my whole strategy for Christmas shopping now. But the young man Joshua made a comment, and I've heard various variations of what he said, but his comment was, it's not enough to, I'm paraphrasing, so it's not enough to have a seat at the table, you need to have a plate. And I thought, that's a great way of putting it. So for me, I look at the future, and technology continues to be a catalyst for a lot of change, but I want that table to continue to grow and those difficult conversations across generations and across different groups to continue. But I want to make sure that everybody has a plate, and it's the same size plate. Like, I don't want you to have a dinner plate and me to have a salad plate. I want everybody's plate to kind of be the same size. And so that's kind of, we've made great strides in the last 3 years. I want to see that continue and those conversations continue.
Yeah, I may be a little naive, but I think we're almost at our greatest time in history because we've never been this disrupted, right? If you think about everything we've shared, who could have forced us to work remotely in this virtual environment? I mean, I can't think of another scenario that would put us in this environment. He says we have 15 minutes. Okay, so.
Thank you for pointing that out. I was so interested in what you were saying. I missed the giant
There's
1-5
a giant 15 in
sign.
front of me. But think about all the inequities we deal with. Though we don't have a solution in this 45-minute time frame to talk about the solutions we have to fix an inequality. But moms who can't afford daycare for their children or don't have access to transportation can make a living today from home. I mean, that radically changed in the last 3 years, and we could go on and on and on with lots of examples. So I think that, first of all, we're having much more courageous conversations. First in my career, the things we talk about at the office are much different than people would have been willing to and able to talk about at the office, virtually or in person. We have the ability to make money in different ways. And I don't think that's going to go, we're not going to go backwards because the next generation are so socially, they care so much about social issues. They care so much about the environment. They care, so I think we're only going forward. Certainly we don't have the solutions in place for all the issues we have because we're also all human. It's going to take us, I think, the rest of our lives and many other lives to get to a better place, but we're having the right conversations. And I do not think those were happening so consistently and so broadly before the pandemic, before we had the level of social unrest that we faced together. Just the number of natural disasters we faced in the last year. I mean, just all of these series of issues really force us to be more collaborative, to really think about the human spirit. Never at a time have we talked as much about mental health, right? I mean, how courageous was Joshua last night? I mean, I think that changed all of us forever. And we are now caring about each other more than we did before, and we want to care for the whole person and do what we can to really address it. So I think the opportunities are amazing, and we're not going backwards. So
I think that's wonderful. Someone I heard recently talked about the fact that sometimes you don't realize that you're making history when you're sitting in it. And I would like to argue we are all sitting in it right now. I also heard something, I think it was last night, I think it was Senator Reverend Warnock who talked about not giving up. And I do want to acknowledge this work is hard. This work is hard. I think sometimes people look at our jobs, especially if they have some element of giving, and they think that, we're kissing babies and handing out the big checks and going to galas, right? We sit in it. We live in this work every day. Whether you open an old-fashioned newspaper or you open Twitter, you can't avoid what's coming at you. And so I feel like so often our personal lives and our work lives are just so intertwined, and you can't get away from it. And in some cases you want to, but you care so deeply about the issue. So for me last night, I was just in a place, it had been a long day, and to hear him say, "Who am I to give up?" and to hear that man say, "Who am I to give up?" was really inspiring. So I think the key to all of this is we have to stay in it. We have to be bold. We have to trust each other. We have to be vulnerable. But we have to stay at it because our generation, future generations, our planet, that's all we got. We've got to keep up the fight. So with that, I do want to open it up to Q&A. And I think Jason's got a mic, and I'm hoping there's someone who has a question, and we can just run a mic right out to you. And please introduce yourself to us when you ask your question so we know who you are.
Good afternoon, Moses Jenkins, and I'm with Empower 360 out of Phoenix, Arizona. Thank you all for coming. My question is for Franz. Franz?
Yes, Franz.
Service-connected community disabled veterans, we need your help, assistance. There's a lot of folks in the business world who want to offer us discounts to make our life a little bit easier while we're in our road to recovery. So while we're looking to make that possible, how are you thinking about ways to make it easier for those, service-connected, first responders, health educators, and so forth, to be able to benefit from your platforms? And thank you.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to answer this a little more broadly, but let's talk afterwards because there may be more specific programs that are not within my portfolio. I've learned to be humble about knowing every aspect of our platform. But look, our whole focus is to try to be sure that we're enabling more affordable, easier, and safer transactions, and that we're providing as much flexibility through our digital wallet as we can. And we also work directly with nonprofits and with organizations to be sure that we can address the needs of their specific constituencies. So we're in that work. With respect to your specific question, and in Arizona, we've got, why don't you and I talk, and I'll connect you to the folks that are focusing on the specific constituencies.
Great. Jason, I'm gonna count on our runners to call on people. Thank you.
Blessings. My name is Olivia Maxwell. I am the Executive Director for On the Rise Community Development, where we do financial, and we don't say literacy because it's really not just literacy. And so I wanted to put that out there as a caveat and a thought that as we look at the financial education movement, how do we couple that? And what is, my direct question would be, what is your targeted approach for ensuring that some of the smaller nonprofits that are doing the work, that we're spreading across the board? Because I think we become narrow focused. We're giving to larger organizations and we're saying, hey, you take care of everything that they need. But the reality is there are plenty of smaller organizations that actually have impact numbers that well surpass some of our larger organizations. And I'd like to know if there's a targeted strategy for supporting some of the smaller organizations that are just as impactful.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with just, I hope I answer your question, but I would say two ways. One is First Horizon operates across the Southeast and all the way to Texas, and we run a market-centric approach. And I mention that because we believe that by having leaders in the markets, we understand the specific needs of that community, the most pressing needs, and the people and the relationships that are most instrumental to addressing them. So it's never about size, it's always about impact. And so we lean on that operational structure to really understand our communities. And so thank you for pointing that out, because there are so many different needs in different communities, and we really want to be attuned to those and make sure that we're supporting not just financially, but in all the different ways we can, from programming to products and services. And on the flip side, we also partner with companies, businesses, organizations like Operation Hope through our Hope Inside program, which is then taking resources, that partnership, and drilling down to bring small businesses, small nonprofits into those programs so that we arm them with the information and knowledge that they need to be successful. So we try to cut at it as many ways as we can so that we're again taking care of the community in a multifaceted approach.
Yeah, I would say, challenging the status quo and sort of where we've historically given, and we have a very similar approach. We have community development managers across the Truist footprint, so we're a Mid-Atlantic Southeast bank, and they're what we refer to as the boots on the ground team members that are really engaging with who are the nonprofit partners that are driving true impact into the community, and how can we support them not only philanthropically but also bringing teammates to the table to knowledge share and be a resource in products and services. And so I think it is a combination of supporting larger organizations, yes, but also making sure that the grassroots organizations that are really boots on the ground also have access to our resources as well.
I know we have a lot of questions. I just want to mention, I'm really glad you asked that question, because what you asked about was a specific strategy, and I think many of us actually need to think about that question and think about what is our specific strategy, because we all operate in systems. And systems are complicated things. But if you do any work around community-centered philanthropy, which is a fascinating trend and a sea change, I think, in how we will do what we do, the community knows who is doing good work in community. So the more that we can trust community and change the power dynamic, so it's not us sitting in our offices saying, I know who the good organizations are out there, but I am going to trust the community to tell me who is doing the right work in that community. That is something that I think will change the system and will change some of our outcomes. So something I would ask all of us that are on this side of the house to think about is that question of a specific strategy. It's an excellent one, and it's one that we'll definitely be thinking about.
Thank you. My name is Siobhan Richardson. I'm founder and CEO of Thinking Ink Grant Consulting. So a lot of my clients are nonprofit organizations, and we're helping them apply for grants, and we do consulting for them. So I have two very important questions. My first question is, what does capacity building look like for you all? Because I know there's a lot of nonprofit leaders who are already stretched really, really thin, and although they appreciate the resources for connection to subject matter experts, sometimes they're required to participate in cohorts that eats more of their time and ends up being more of a burden than in help. So that's my first question. And my second question is around trust-based philanthropy. How does that show up in your application process and also in the grant management process as far as reporting on metrics of success?
Whew, that's a good question.
I'll start with the,
You want to start?
all righty, wow.
I don't think there's a haiku for that one.
Right.
I'm working on it.
Yeah. I'll give you time to work on the haiku. No. So I'll start with the capacity building question, because this is something that my entire career in CRA community development, that's been something that we have struggled with. So we at Truist, our strategy is actually to look at capacity building in three main areas. So we look at that leadership level. So what leadership resources can we bring to the table that can be leveraged by the leaders of the nonprofit? Then we look at the organizational capacity. So this is helping nonprofits evaluate their balance sheet, their income statement. That quite frankly includes philanthropic and other capital support. But then also what we recognize is we need to invest in their workforce. So what a lot of nonprofits have seen over the last couple of years is their workforce has left, or it's harder to attract a younger workforce to come and work for maybe not as grand of a salary as they could in the corporate world. And so investing in professional development so that those team members can continue to grow and progress in their career and move into leadership roles. There's not one definition, because capacity building is financial support, both debt, equity, and philanthropic support, but it's also about investing in the human capital of a nonprofit and providing resources that are useful but not a hindrance to that organization growing, and making sure that it's meeting their needs where they're at. The metric question.
Philanthropy and metrics.
Yeah, so we, depending on the size of the grant, depends on how engaged we are on a monthly, quarterly basis with the nonprofit, where we're talking through what those impact metrics are. As it relates to just our philanthropic giving, we do ask that the nonprofits provide an annual impact statement that summarizes everything that they've done, both the numeric but also the qualitative. It's important that we hear the stories from the communities. Numbers are great, don't get me wrong, but I want to hear the story about the family that moved from public housing into home ownership. I want to hear about the individual that was making minimum wage, but thanks to a workforce development program now has a livable wage job, but in an industry with high growth, so that they now have not just a job, but they have a career. So it's a combination. The larger grants, we're engaging quarterly, and we're having conversations to talk about how can we continue to do better and help them tell their impact story.
I do want to acknowledge we've got about 1 minute. And I know we've got a lot more questions, and by the way, some very smart audience members out there. So I would also offer, when we are done, come up to this stage and share your ideas, how you would answer those questions with all of us, because we do need to change the way we do what we do. But anything else to add before we close?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add, and our approach is a bit different because we don't have a foundation. We operate through our social impact team and through the sort of core capacity of the company. And so we approach our nonprofit relationships as partnerships. And so we look for a nonprofit relationship which will help us to extend our mission and the values of the company, but where we also have something distinctive we can bring, like our donation platform, like our expertise in economic empowerment, or our employees' capabilities, and we look for volunteer opportunities. We look for a connection to the kind of work we're trying to advance to support vulnerable communities.
They turn off the mic.
Apparently, we're done.
Okay, we're done, but we'll sit right here and come on up if you have questions.
Please join me